Welcome to the Black and Gold Breakdown on the channel. Jerry Bailey with you as always, USA Today. Behind the steel curtain of SB Nation. Joining me today, Steelers Twitter's favorite son, co-host of Around the 412, as well as Steelers Afternoon Drive on Steelers Now, Zachary Smith. Good to see you, buddy.
What's going on, Jared? Appreciate you having me. It's been far too long.
It has been very long. So I'm happy to be reconnecting with you. I feel like you and I are starting to look more alike as time goes on.
This is the podcaster look. Everybody just eventually molds into this.
Everybody eventually just wear a black hat, chains, get hand tattoos, and a mustache. You got that down if you want to be a podcaster. But no, it's good to see you. Busy morning in terms of Steelers news. If we can call it news, I guess we can call it news. But let's just start off with the whole. Let's talk about Brandon Aiyuk real quick. So the report. There's been multiple reports, I guess. Benjamin Albright put out a screenshot yesterday on Twitter of a conversation that he had that said that the Steelers were pursuing Brandon Aiyuk, which this conversation took place in March. And then as murmurs started, piling back up over the past couple of days of Brandon Aiyuk potentially requesting a trade. And then a fellow by the name of John Friskella saying that Brandon Aiyuk has requested a trade, although, as we were talking about in the lobby, maybe take that with a grain of salt, depending on where this is going. But regardless, this has been a talking point for Steelers fans over the past few weeks, after Brandon Aiyuk tweeted for the first time in over a year, and his tweet saying, directed at Mike Tomlin saying, "Hey, I heard we look alike." And that caused waves throughout Steelers Twitter to be like, "Oh my God, they're really doing this." Things have died down and now they seem to be picking back up. Where do you fall in terms of all of this?
Which, by the way, they do look alike. I mean, I put the post up of them, and then that ended up being on the Pat McAfee show. Somebody did a face swap, giving Tomlin the dreads and everything like that. But no, this goes back very far. I mean, the Steelers have been turning every possible stone in this wide receiver market, clearly. I had put out a while ago talking to somebody from San Fran that they were asking about Deebo Samuel. So those conversations, I'm sure they called San Fran and were asking about both. Because those are just the conversations that happen. That's just doing due diligence. And if your GM is not doing that, they're not a very good GM if they're not finding out who's available. Same thing with Terry McLaurin in Washington, although that sounded like it was the Steelers asking, Washington telling them to screw off, and then they hung up the phone. But Brandon Aiyuk is a fantastic player. I mean, every team should want a player like Brandon Aiyuk. Was number 7 last year in receiving yards, second only behind George Pickens in terms of yards per reception. Still just 24 years old. Obviously, a big payday is coming his way, and that is probably, really the center of where these conversations are being had. He wants paid. They already have a highly paid receiver there in the aforementioned Deebo Samuel. So, what does it look like for Brandon Aiyuk, whether that is in San Fran or somewhere else? I'm really interested in that. And at the same time, I think now is the time to do this because it's before CeeDee Lamb, before Justin Jefferson really blow up this wide receiver market. $22 to $25 million per year, assuming it's somewhere within that range, I think will look like a steal once, Justin Jefferson gets 30, CeeDee Lamb gets 28-ish, whatever that might be. But yeah, Brandon Aiyuk is a fantastic player. I don't know what the acquisition cost would be, but I think anybody that doesn't want him on their football team before even knowing what the team is giving up is just a bonehead.
Yeah, and I had DB on here either last week or the week prior, absolutely. And he made a really good point that's really stuck with me. He's like, you are what you invest in. So the Steelers can't complain. Steelers fans can't complain if the receivers room's bad, if they're not willing to make a move like this and to, go out and get a Brandon Aiyuk. And you can't go into the season with your wide receiver 2 being Van Jefferson or Calvin Austin or Quez Watkins like that. I don't see that being
right now. Their wide receiver 2 is Pat Freiermuth.
Sure. Yeah. But in terms of, a move like this, you talked about it looking like a steal down the road. We're seeing that right now with the defensive line market where the Bills paid Ed Oliver, what looked like, that's a lot of money for Ed Oliver. But then over the past few weeks, all of these defensive linemen, defensive ends getting ginormous money. And now Ed Oliver is the 9th highest paid at his position. So it's better to get ahead of this and maybe, look a little bit like, okay, that's a lot of money right now. But like you said, when Justin Jefferson eventually gets $30 million a year, when CeeDee Lamb eventually gets close to $30 million a year, you're looking at what you're paying Brandon Aiyuk, which, like you said, could be between 22 and 25. That's going to look like, oh, okay, for Brandon Aiyuk, that's pretty good value. In terms of what they'd have to give up, a lot of people are saying it'll probably be, the AJ Brown trade where it's a first and a third.
Yeah,
I understand why people would say that, but the receiver market, the trade market this offseason says that's not what it's going to be. We saw Jerry Jeudy go for a pair of day threes. We saw Deontay Johnson get traded for a day three and a player. I just don't see. If it came a few years ago, maybe, but the receiver market this year says that's probably not. No, Brandon Aiyuk is better than Jerry Jeudy. Brandon Aiyuk is better than Deontay Johnson. But the jump to go from, okay, this guy's going for a day three pick to, okay, a first and a third, I just don't know if that's there. I could see, a second and a third. The Steelers have 2/3 as well in this year's draft. If they wanted to part with, say, hey, 2/3 for Brandon Aiyuk, maybe. I don't know what the compensation is going to go down as, just because it's been so unpredictable this year. But let's say that it is the AJ Brown trade. Would you be comfortable saying, okay, first and a third for Brandon Aiyuk?
Are they in the same year?
That I was going to get to that, because what if they split the difference? Like, okay, how about a first this year, third next year? Or if they somehow pull it off, like, hey, we'll give you 84 this year and then our first round pick next year. What do you say?
Right.
If they're able to do that, then I'm in.
Yeah, that's a lot more. I mean, I think that I still do it right, but I think 84 in the first next year is even more palatable, just
Absolutely.
because you're still able to address the offensive line needs that you have in the slot corner. Like, you're kind of giving one of those up, being able to check that box if you make this Aiyuk trade. But doing it in the first round is obviously, unless you're talking about like a swap, like if they could do 20 for 31 and then 84 and then the first next year, something like that, whatever it might be. But as long as you're able to still keep a first rounder this year, I think that I'm fully on board with it. But yeah, I just, man, the conversation surrounding this has just been insane to me. Like, I think that there's a lot of people maybe underrating Brandon Aiyuk and also overrating the value that you're going to get at receiver in the draft. I get it. Like, these draft classes do come out more pro ready more and more every year. And maybe that is also playing into the diminishing return for receivers as well. Cause like having that foresight with the salary cap going up, I think GMs also have the foresight in terms of what these receivers are coming out and how pro ready they are. At the same time, you can't just be expecting that you're going to draft a guy like Brandon Aiyuk every single year. Like, there are maybe 3 guys in this draft class that are going to be that type of receiver, hopefully be that type of receiver. And that's not even a guarantee. Like, listen, I love Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, and Malik Neighbors, but like, do I expect them to be wide receiver ones for their respective teams? Sure, but there's no guarantee there. And I can guarantee you that Brandon Aiyuk is a number 1 wide receiver. So I don't know. I just think that at some point in time, we've kind of lost that thought process where people are just like, oh, you can just draft a receiver and they're going to be a stud.
And I've had this conversation with so many people, is if you can get Brandon Aiyuk, you get Brandon Aiyuk. It's the Family Guy, the mystery box with the boat situation. Oh, it could be a boat, but the mystery box could be anything. It could even be a boat, We had a similar situation like this a few years ago when CeeDee Lamb, Henry Ruggs, and Jerry Jeudy were all coming out. Everybody's like, oh, these are 3 studs, can't miss guys. And CeeDee Lamb ended up being really good. Jerry Jeudy is fine, and we unfortunately know what happened with Henry Ruggs. But I hate the notion that, like, oh, you can just draft a guy and he'll be fine. No, you can't. You can't bank on that. Even with the Steelers' history of being good at drafting receivers, like, it's very, very slim chances that whoever they take, even if Ricky Pearsall, which people seem to really like, or Malachi Corley, like, there's a very slim chance that either of them end up being as good as Brandon Aiyuk. And if you can get somebody who is as good on the outside as Brandon Aiyuk, you do it. There should be no conversation about this. And everybody's always like, you can't trade a first round pick for Brandon Aiyuk. Oh, watch me, dude. I would do it in a heartbeat.
Here's the other
go ahead.
Here's the other kind of like caveat that I'll throw in here too that nobody's really talking about is, man, Brandon Aiyuk loves to block. Like, you're telling me that Arthur Smith would not love to have a guy like that, which is interesting.
There's a video of one of McCaffrey's runs last year where Aiyuk's hustling down the field and just shoving dudes out of the way. Like, he's more than willing to do it.
And I'm sure the Steelers, knowing their history, took note of that as well. And it probably plays into their interest. Anybody that does well against them, they have interest in the future if they become
carved them up last year.
Yeah. But yeah, I just think that that's another part of his game that kind of flies under the radar, which is interesting because early in his career, that was a knock on him. Like what Kyle Shanahan and that offensive coaching staff has done with him in his tenure there to get him to the point where he is at now, they deserve a ton of credit for molding him into this player. But like, I don't think that that's because I've seen that conversation too. Like he's a scheme dependent player. Like I don't feel that way either. I think he can go somewhere else and also be that. And maybe that's playing into it too. Like maybe he hears that chatter as well. And he wants to prove that he can be the guy somewhere else. Cause there's people that think that he's the number 4 option within that passing attack. And it's just, man, like the conversation again has just kind of gotten ridiculous for me with Brandon Aiyuk. And I get it because like teams that are interested in him are also, it's an interest, like we see this at draft time too, where it's like knocking a player basically to lower their value so then you can acquire them because you secretly are interested.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing the Cowboys do that right now where all of a sudden murmurs are starting that, oh, Michael Parsons is kind of a pain in the butt in the locker room. That is very much somebody in Dallas being like, let's leak this so we can lowball him and make sure that nobody else wants him. Like, that's not what's going to happen. They're just going to be like, oh, Michael Parsons.
Look at with CJ Stroud last year, like right before
yes.
We've kind of seen it with Malik Neighbors this year as well. Like randomly, all of a sudden, it comes out that he had like a gun on Bourbon Street years ago. Like, yeah, it's disgusting. You know what happens to these guys around this time of year. I know draft is obviously very different than trade, but just in terms of leaking information or putting false narratives out there.
Yeah. And I mean, we've seen things already with the 49ers this offseason where with Eric Armstead, where they asked him to take a pay cut and he pretty much told him to kick rocks. So they released him and he went to Jacksonville. It seems like this is a situation where Brandon Aiyuk knows what he's worth. The 49ers aren't willing to give him that much. And when you're the 49ers, where you have so many talented guys that you know you got to pay, you're going to have to try to get a hometown discount out of some of these guys. Because if you look at their roster and how many of them are set to be free agents either this year or the following year, it's a lot of guys that they got to try to bring back to keep the majority of this core together. So you can kind of understand where they're coming from a business standpoint of like, look, we're going to try to pay as many of you as we can, but just understand that if you stay, we can't give you that, you know, the maximum value that you could probably get elsewhere. I think Brandon Aiyuk recognizes that. And if you could go somewhere, man, I mean, go to Pittsburgh, whether it be, you know, Russell Wilson or Justin Fields throwing you the ball opposite of George Pickens, a new offensive scheme with Arthur Smith. I don't know, man. It would make me very happy, and it would make, I think, a lot of Steelers fans very happy. I don't care what you gotta give up. They're not trading 9 draft picks for Brandon Aiyuk. Everybody freaking out about the potential compensation. If it's a first and a third, I'm doing it. I understand what you have to invest if you want good returns on your investment. So I think that's everybody, it might be hard for somebody to swallow.
Everybody talks about how little they spend on the offensive side of the football. Me personally, I'm just like, okay, I don't care where they're spending it, just put together the best possible team. At the same time, it's because, you know, that all the early draft compensation that they've spent recently has been on the offensive side of the football. So, you know, that's kind of where that balances out. And there just haven't been guys that they've paid second, third contracts to on the offensive side. I will say this, though. I want to get your opinion on this before. I know we want to talk about the defensive transition, but George Pickens going into year 3, like if you acquire Brandon Aiyuk, is that all of a sudden taking out the idea of paying George Pickens an extension down the line?
I don't think so, because I think George Pickens, I don't think George Pickens is a number 1. And that's not me trying to slight George Pickens. It's just, he's not a guy who is known for winning at the line of scrimmage, for having like this extended route tree, for being able to create natural separation. He's good at what he does well, and that is winning 50-50 balls and making them basically 80-20 balls. And if you line him up in the slot and get him the ball on a quick slant or a drag, he'll give you good yards after catch. But I don't think that he is going to be, you know, a predominant X receiver. I think he's going to be a really, really high-end top 3 number 2 guy and a really good scheme. Again, that's not me trying to crap on George Pickens. He's awesome, but I just don't think that he is going to be the guy to be the number 1 in a really, really good offense. That's just my opinion, but I don't think that takes away their opportunity to pay him.
I don't disagree, but I'm just wondering how he views the situation. Because
sure, yes,
I could see him looking at it differently and thinking that he should be paid. You know, like looking at the quarterback play that he's had so far, I actually think Russ is a really good fit for him. Like I think he's probably the biggest beneficiary of Russell Wilson. You know, there's
going to be 5 George Pickens balls a game this season, and if he catches at least 2 of them, then I think he's a happy camper.
Absolutely. But so I'm just curious as to how Brandon Aiyuk would affect George Pickens down the line in terms of contract talks. But at the same time, like if you're asking me to pick one, it's going to be Brandon Aiyuk. So if for whatever reason things were to get nasty, similar, let's say we're talking about being on the other side of the Brandon Aiyuk thing in like a year or two with George Pickens. I think that that's probably the risk that you have to take in order to acquire a player like Brandon Aiyuk. Because again, 1-for-1, I'm taking Brandon Aiyuk over him.
Yeah, and could there be a situation like Antonio Brown and Juju? Maybe not to the extent of that, but I'm comparing apples to oranges here, but walk with me. Could there be a situation in a couple years where it turns out that George Pickens, does get a little bit envious or jealous or whatever it may be? Sure. But at the same time, if I'm Pickens, I'm saying, okay, we're getting a top 10 receiver. That's going to take a ton of attention off of me and open up opportunities for me to get the ball more, because if they're going to be doubling somebody, it's going to be 11. So I think that if I'm Pickens, that opens up opportunities for me one-on-one downfield, situations I know I can win at, rather than have to worry about being the predominant target that teams are going to double and have to rely on, like we said before, Van Jefferson. If they draft Ricky Pearsall,
with that room right now, he might see triple coverage. So
that's what I'm saying. So I think that if I'm George Pickens, I'm welcoming bringing in somebody like Brandon Aiyuk, because he's going to garner a ton of attention, but still be able to get open and get his touches. I'm going to still be able to win downfield, get my targets, get my catches, get my touches, and everything like that. So I think that a Brandon Aiyuk acquisition benefits everybody in the offense, whether it be the run game, because you got to pay attention to those two studs on the outside. We know that Arthur Smith's going to run the ball early and heavy sets very often. And if the run game is successful, it's going to set up play action for deep shots to George Pickens. It's going to set up play action for intermediate crossers for Brandon Aiyuk to win at the line of scrimmage and separate. I think everybody wins in a situation like this. So I'm not too worried about it in the immediate future, but in the deep future, could it be a problem? Maybe.
This is so in real time as we are recording this. I also have Twitter open.
Okay.
Brandon Aiyuk's agent quoted and said, "You need better sources."
Okay, so we can. It appears that we can somewhat put to rest the notion that Brandon Aiyuk requested a trade. That doesn't all of a sudden end the possibility that he is traded.
Sure,
we see things like this every offseason where things go back and forth, but very noteworthy to I think that's a good place to put him.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love that he's dunking on John Friscella here. For Steelers fans that are believing this, just go back and look at that dude's timeline regarding the Steelers over the last week. The Kenny Pickett stuff he put out there, the Deontay Johnson stuff, the Najee Harris stuff. This guy's been very Steelers heavy over the last week or so, and I wonder why that is. The engagement that he's getting has been top tier.
Absolutely. Is he monetizing from this? Is this a blue check mark?
Oh yeah.
Okay, just making sure I just burped. Excuse me. So that's a good place to kind of put a ribbon on this and transition to the defensive side, because there has been multiple big additions on that side of the ball. Most notably, Patrick Queen, off-ball linebacker coming over from Baltimore, who will be making an appearance on this channel in the coming weeks. So wink, wink for that. So that'd be a fun sit down. But let's talk about him to start off. As well as Deshaun Elliott, because I've said for a few weeks now, I think that the additions of Deshaun Elliott and Patrick Queen are moves with a bigger goal in mind, and that is to take a lot of things off the plate of Minkah Fitzpatrick, who over the last few seasons, if you remember going into 2021, they had a mess at nickel cornerback where they just didn't have a solidified guy. So Minkah was wearing a lot of hats on that side of the ball, having to hop up and nickel, helping run defense. I think that over the past few years, he's had to wear more hats than they would like him to have to wear, and they just want him to get back to doing what he does well, and that's playing center field, reading the quarterback, and getting interceptions. I think that you have a Deshaun Elliott now who, if they need somebody to come up in the box and play against the run, there you go. You got a Deshaun Elliott. You need somebody to patrol the middle a little bit more as a linebacker in coverage. You got Patrick Queen. Minkah, sit back there, get us takeaways, and do what has made you a 3-time All-Pro. I think that there's definitely bigger thoughts in mind with these acquisitions.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that, Jared, they got burned last year, yards after the catch. But the thing was, like, the amount of splash plays they were giving up, they weren't just like bombs that they were giving up where they're losing contain over the top or anything like that. Just so unathletic going side to side. Like, teams are stretching them sideline to sideline, and they didn't have the athletes on the back end to keep up at the second and third level. So Patrick Queen, Deshaun Elliott, I'll even throw Dante Jackson in there just because of the speed that he brings to the table. I just think that they wanted to get faster on that side of the football. In Patrick Queen, it's another dart that they're throwing at the trying to replace Ryan Shazier, which they have unsuccessfully done ever since the injury. But I'll say this was them basically getting the opportunity to move up right in front of the dartboard and throw a dart as opposed to standing back at the line like everybody else.
Basically just like chucking one blindfolded and hoping Joe Schobert, we'll see. Oh no, that didn't work. So yeah, I very much agree.
Man, yeah, I love Patrick Queen. There was obviously, like, I think everybody similarly to trying to go back to the conversation we're having about Brandon Aiyuk, where people are like devaluing him after the fact, talking about just like how it was all Roquan, that made him. He had some growing pains early in his career, but like how much of that is a product of him just being a rookie and learning the NFL?
Yeah, that's called being a rookie and a second-year player in the NFL. I think that's going to happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. So like his timeline basically just coincided with and I'm sure Roquan did help him figure things out.
Sure.
But now it's time for him to go, somewhere else and be that number one guy that he was drafted to be in Baltimore before they went and got Roquan. So very excited about that addition. I think like it was probably a bigger splash than I expected at off-ball linebacker, but at the same time, it wasn't as big of a splash in other areas that I expected. So I guess there's some trade-off there. But yeah, I mean, in Patrick Queen, Deshaun Elliott, a little bit under the radar signing too. That's another position where, like I mentioned, I thought maybe there would be like, I don't know about a bigger fish, but like, there was so much conversation. The Justin Simmons stuff, obviously, pipe dream that people were throwing out there. And I know that they were interested. They put an offer out to him basically when the tampering period started. That's just been sitting there. But between him and some other guys that were on the market, I would say that Deshaun Elliott was not a name that originally came to mind, but I think the fit makes sense. He's a guy that can do a lot of different things. Obviously, he has nickel experience as well. I'm curious if they've been wanting to do this 3 safety stuff for so long, but it seems like one of the safeties has always been hurt for the last 2 years and trying to do so.
They had an opportunity to when they had Casey brought him over, and I think Edmonds was still there at the time with Minka, so they had the opportunity to do that. And I think Minka was dealing with an injury or Edmonds was dealing with something. So I'm excited to see what that looked like.
KZ, the first year he was here in 22, he broke his arm in the preseason and then didn't return until like week 9 or whatever against the Saints.
Against New Orleans, yeah.
So yeah, when they were able to do it, it was effective. They just haven't been able to throw a lot of 3 safety sets of teams, but this is, the opportunity to do so, getting a guy like Deshaun Elliott in here. So between him, KZ, and Minka, I'm very hopeful that they can get Minka back into that, deep half field safety, let him do some robber stuff. I think that it's going to be a really good marriage.
I wonder if the Justin Simmons stuff does come to fruition though, because he still is available. And if he does decide, hey,
does that mean cutting ties with KZ?
I was just about to say, if that does happen, I think KZ is going to be the one that's on the way out, just because I don't have anything, by the way, nothing against Demonte Casey. It's just if I had to pick 3 out of them, I would pick obviously Minka, Simmons, and if it comes down to Deshaun Elliott and Casey, well, they just signed Deshaun Elliott. Casey has been fine, but I think I would take Elliott in that situation. So I think that he would be the odd guy out, where they just outright cut him ahead of the regular season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's been on my mind too, just because actually before even like the Justin Simmons, just anybody really on the safety market, like Cam Curl going for what he did, man. Like
I would have done that if I was the Steelers. Yeah, that would have been a great deal to get if you're Pittsburgh.
There's so many guys, Julian Blackman, who ended up going back to the Colts, but I know that the Steelers were interested in as well. Like there were so many. I was looking at like Casey's not making a ton of money, but for what he was and what guys were getting on this safety market,
you can get better guys for slightly more money.
Right. Yeah. Or like, the same or slightly more. So nothing against KZ, but like with the way that the safety market was this year, I probably would have cut bait and signed 2 safeties.
I think that that's still very much a possibility. I'd have to. Who are this? Is Eddie Jackson still on the market? I feel like he signed somewhere. Did he not?
Eddie Jackson. I don't know, because
let me pull it up here. I'll pull up Spotrac to see who's gone where. Safety free agents. I feel like he might have, but I could also. I am often wrong, so well, maybe I'm incorrect.
The Bears signed Kevin Byard, so they definitely didn't bring Eddie Jackson back, but I don't know if he signed anywhere.
So here we'll go to statuses to available just to see what safeties are still out there. So Jamal Adams, Justin Simmons, Eddie Jackson is still available. Quandre Diggs, that could be a fun one.
Quandre Diggs, yeah. He's what, is he 30?
He's 31, so he's a little bit older. But I mean, again, Justin Simmons is 30, Eddie Jackson's 30. I don't think that Jamal Adams would necessarily be. I don't know. What do you make of that? What would that be like?
Jamal Adams, if you were going to double dip at safety, it could have made sense to get Justin Simmons and Jamal Adams and have Jamal Adams just play exclusively in the box. Like if you're signing Jamal Adams, it's just to play around the line of scrimmage. Like you're not going to ask him to do any deep field stuff. Like that's not who he is as a player. Honestly, never really been his strength, but certainly not at this point in his career at his age with all the injuries that he's undergone. So, I thought I've thought of scenarios where it'd be fun to add him just to be like an exclusive box safety, basically a linebacker, and also send him on blitz packages and stuff. But it would involve getting a guy like Justin Simmons or something as well that could also play deep half.
Yeah, fair enough. Other guys, Tracy Walker, he got cut by Detroit. That would be an interesting one. Marcus May, Jaron Curse. I think that those are probably all the bigger names out there. I mean, would you be?
Jaron Curse is huge. That's another guy that probably operate more like a linebacker, 6'4" safety. I mean, he's huge. I
wonder if they'd reach out and try bringing back Terrell Edmonds on a cheap 1 or 2 year deal.
Again, a player that I prefer, more around with what he does around the line of scrimmage than anything else. But he also I don't think he got enough credit for his work against tight ends over the last few seasons as well when he was here. How long were we complaining about tight ends just burning us year after year? And then he came into his own, not necessarily his rookie year where he was asked to do way too much after Morgan Burnett was an absolute bust of a signing.
Oh, Morgan Burnett, what a shout. Yeah, that was just abysmal. Yeah.
Which I didn't necessarily have the foresight of that happening. I thought he was going to be a decent addition for them.
Yeah. But, no, I think the 21 and 22 years were the years where Terrell Edmonds became a very evident part of the defense that didn't get as much appreciation as he should have, but was very much a glue guy. I think glue guy is a good term for what his role was.
Was Minkah his Roquan?
Oh, that's an interesting way of looking at that. I never thought of it like that.
I mean, that's for people that think that Roquan was entirely the reason that Patrick Queen started to play better. They probably have that same opinion about Minkah and Terrell Edmonds.
Yeah. And look, Terrell Edmonds, by all means, not a bad safety at all. I think that, again, similar situation that we had about Pickens. I think he's a very, very good number 2 guy with an elite guy next to him. I think that it could be worth exploring if they decide that they want to, have a little bit. How much of an upgrade is Edmonds from KZ?
Ooh. Honestly, for what the role that they're probably going to have them play, I would say not significant, but I think it is an upgrade because I think you want Elliott to, I mean, this is just pure speculation on what those 3 safety sets are going to look like. But I feel like Casey's probably going to be the one that's more in the box than Elliott. And if that's the case, I would prefer Edmonds in that role than KZ.
Yeah, I think so too. And again, not a lot of money that they're paying KZ. You could bring Terrell Edmonds back on a relatively cheap deal if that's what you decided to do. And the Justin Simmons thing is still out there as a possibility. We'll see. We'll see if it ends up being, more or less just a pipe dream. I don't know.
We're officially a month ago. It was officially a month ago that I know that they put a contract offer on the table to him. At that time, Philly, and I don't like Tennessee with the way that they've thrown money around this offseason. Not sure if they are still in the market, but that was the other team that I was told. Philly made a ton of sense. I thought that would actually be where he landed. I don't know if that's still going to end up happening, but he was looking for 11 to 12 million per year. He's
not going to get that. I really just don't think, especially you look at the safety market this year. We're not to say that guys aren't worth that type of money because Justin Simmons is fantastic, but when you look at just how deep this safety class was, I mean, Cam Curl went for 2 for 13,
and Jordan really Whitehead, 9. There was only 9 million on that are that other 4 million is like incentive based that are kind of things. I'm not saying he's not going to hit them, but they're
hard incentives to hit.
Yeah, so 2 years, 9 million basically for Cam Curl. Stupid.
And again, Justin Simmons is better than Cam Curl, but again, we talk about Cam Curl is still only 24. Justin Simmons is 30. A lot of those different factors.
He's better right now. Is he going to be in a year or two?
Right. That's the question. Yeah. So I feel like he might just be sitting there at his house, just tapping each offer. Just I wonder which.
But he's still making money. He's still getting paid from Denver as well.
Yeah, they still owe money.
That's why the $11 to $12 million thing kind of took me by surprise. I mean, I'm not saying like, hey, get your money. I'm all for
exactly.
that. But what is he looking for at this point? Like, what would make him sign? 10? 8?
I think that 8 might be the sweet spot. Have you ever seen Greatest Showman?
Yes.
The part where Zac Efron and Hugh Jackman are singing The Other Side, and they're like 15, I'll do 8, 12, maybe 9, 10. Maybe I think that could be the back and forth discourse, and they finally shake hands at like 8.5 for a year. I think that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, in here's the thing, like I feel like maybe like he would probably be signed by now if people thought he was the exact same version of Justin Simmons, right?
Yeah. Sure.
This is an opportunity for him now, if he does sign a 1-year deal for whatever it might be, to show that he hasn't lost a step, he still can be that player, then hit free agency again next year. So I also, wherever he does sign, this is just a prediction on my part. I think he's going to be a 1-year deal.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a 1-year deal with a team that he feels like is either like on the cusp of, can be a playoff team, or it could be, like you said, Philadelphia, where, okay, let me go try and get a ring and be an integral part to that. So we'll see. That'll be one that I watch out for. I think Buffalo could be another team that could be in on him, just because, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are both gone. They have Taylor Rapp. They need somebody else on that end. If they can get the money right, I think that's something to pay attention to with the Bills.
Micah Hyde's another guy that isn't signed.
I think Micah Hyde's just going to retire, if I'm perfectly honest.
He's 33. Jeez.
He's 33. He had a neck problem in 2022 that cost him almost the entire season. Him and Poyer both weren't like themselves. But again, when you reach, 33, 32 years old, obviously there's going to be some drop off. Right now, where do you think the Steelers kind of rank in terms of the AFC hierarchy?
Ooh, great question.
What Chiefs, Buffalo, Cincy are like the big three of the conference right now. So I think when healthy, obviously with the Bengals, I would say.
Yeah, but even, man, like I'm not like you have Josh Allen, but like there's a lot of questions about Buffalo. I think too. Like I'm not saying by the time that we kick off the season, a lot of those questions could be answered. We'll see how they approach the draft and everything like that. Very much in the wide receiver conversation, just like the Steelers. But yeah, I think that there's so many questions with them. Baltimore is obviously going to be up there.
Can I say something that's controversial? I mean, I wrote about it already, so it's already out there. I think the Ravens Super Bowl window slammed shut. No more. Gone. I think last year was their absolute best chance of doing it, and they lost way too much this offseason. Losing Mike McDonald, that's a huge loss.
Yes,
Patrick Quinn coming to Pittsburgh, Geno Stone going to Cincinnati. Who in God's name are they throwing to besides Zay Flowers? And Mark Andrews is getting older. Like, I don't know, man. I think that they'll be a very good regular season team. I think they'll be in the playoffs. I don't think that's a team that I worry about anymore, like being a Super Bowl threat.
Okay. I mean, you're absolutely
There's my boiling hot take of the offseason, everybody.
Mike McDonald, I was so happy to see.
Dude, as a Steelers fan, bon voyage. Good luck in Seattle, fella.
Yeah, absolutely. Even on the offensive side, with Todd Monken, he was another guy that like I was super upset when he got that job there. But that's another team. Like we're talking about receivers, right? Who's to say they won't try to make a splash at receiver as well?
If Brandon Aiyuk ends up in Baltimore, I'm going to put my head in my oven. I will be so upset. I'll be so upset.
But looking around the rest of the AFC, obviously, like Miami was a playoff team last year, super fast. I mean, that's clearly what they've predicated their game on. Houston, I mean, how quickly they've rebuilt. For people that are like, they are kind of, I guess, an anomaly in the sense that you never felt like they were just a quarterback away, and then they got the quarterback, and it turns out they were quarterback away.
Yes. As soon as you see like, oh shit, we have a guy and he still has 3 more years on a rookie, get people. Let's spend money, get people around him. Let's try to win this thing. Like they were so quick with it. And I know people are kind of clowning the trade for Diggs right now because it's basically giving up a 2nd-round pick for a 1-year deal. I think the hope for them is that, by like week 7, Stephon's having a great time. He's, getting, 6 catches a game. And he's like, you know what, I'll stay in Houston for another year and I'll sign a 1-year extension. I think that's what they're hoping happens. Which is fine. Make Stephon happy right now and see what happens with him as like a 1B, 1C in the offense. But I think Houston's going to be very fun.
So I think the Steelers are still within that, wild card, maybe 6 or 7 right now in the AFC, which again, like we'll see that could be rearranged after draft and post-draft free agency, which I do think the Steelers are going to be heavily in. I think they're kind of going into the draft with as many holes as they are to then approach free agency after the draft was what they weren't able to address, at least to their satisfaction.
To their liking,
But like my biggest question about the AFC, honestly, I'll get your opinion on this, is who's the second team in the AFC South? I mean, we're talking about the Texans, obviously, but like everybody else under them, like I could make the case for any of them.
As an overall team structure, coaching wise, everything, I like overall Indianapolis, but I can't quit Trevor Lawrence. And I just feel like if you have a guy like that, by the way, Trevor Lawrence getting way too much shit this offseason, way too much for my liking. People look at his raw numbers and everything like that and look at, oh my goodness, 14 interceptions. Well, first of all, 14, not so horrible. And half of them came in the final month of the season when he was dealing with a shoulder injury, a calf injury, a knee injury. He's beat to hell in the final month of the season. Tony Khan was putting him on whatever. He gives Brian Danielson every week. Go out there and wrestle. Go out there and play. You'll be fine. They were 8-3 at one point before he got hurt. So they were the number one seed in the AFC at one point after they beat Houston on the road. Like they were doing so well. And then Lawrence got the injury and then things started kind of falling apart. I think that Jacksonville, they still have plenty to address, especially on the defensive side of the ball, because they had to cut a lot of guys just to pay for Josh Allen. But we'll see how they address the draft. But they have a special quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. I like Anthony Richardson in Indy, but he only played for a month last year. But in that same breath, the Colts were, a play away from going to the playoffs with Gardner Minshew. So, and then Tennessee, it's a big question mark with, is Will Levis going to be at least, good enough? So I admire the fact that they've, said, okay, we'll give Will Levis all the opportunities to succeed. We'll get, Calvin Ridley. We'll spend some money on the defense. We'll bring in an offensive-minded head coach. So I think they're going about it the right way. It just depends on if Will Levis is really that guy. If I had to put money on who's going to be number 2, I'd probably say Jacksonville, just because I believe in Trevor Lawrence that much. But I think that Indy's going to be right there. And Tennessee won't be far behind, but that's going to be a dog. We talk about the AFC North being a hard division. That's going to be a dog fight.
Yeah, I'm super intrigued by it because it was just like the way they went about things was just so differently from team to team, but they all got to a point where they have the case of being the number 2 team in the hierarchy. So
let's play this game. Would the Steelers be the number 2 team if they were in the AFC South?
Ooh.
Like, would you take them over Jacksonville right now, over Indianapolis right now, over Tennessee right now? That'll throw you for a whirl.
Yeah, I mean, it's close. Again, like you're almost kind of projecting what they're going to do from this point to the beginning of the season.
Sure.
I'll say yeah.
Yeah, I think overall roster-wise, like their defense is definitively better than Jacksonville's. I think Indy's going to be like, Indy was quietly had some guys last year that just didn't get a ton of attention on the defensive side of the ball.
I think Shane Steichen's a great coach, by the way.
Shane Steichen's fantastic. Yes, they very clearly have their guy in Shane Steichen, which is great for them. But I think, I think they're better overall than Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville obviously has the better quarterback, which cancels out a lot. Having a great quarterback is like having a bidet. It cleans up a lot of shit. And I think that's the best way of looking at having a really good quarterback. If you got one, it covers up a lot of issues. Right now, would you take them over Cleveland?
Yeah,
I think so too. I think somehow they're getting their starting quarterback back this year, and they're going to be worse. They're worse off with Deshaun Watson than they were last year with Joe Flacco.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I'm not considering Russell Wilson and or Justin Fields world beaters by any means, but like look at where Pittsburgh has been with the quarterback play that they've had. It's hard for me to envision them staying stagnant or taking a step back.
Yeah, I agree. They're playing a third place schedule again. They played a third place schedule last year. I know that's again another apples to oranges type comparison because things change. But the point being that they had a bottom three quarterback play last year. I know we can throw the Jets in that conversation. We can throw the Patriots in that conversation. The Steelers are still very much there. And they won 10 games with that somehow. The fact that they go from having, the 30th best quarterback in the league to, if Russell Wilson and or Justin Fields can stay around the 18th best quarterback in the league like they were last year, hey, that's a big upgrade. And if everything else on the roster lives up to its potential, especially on the defensive side of the ball, why can't they win at least 10 games again? Why couldn't they win 11 games? I think that.
And say what you want about Arthur Smith, but he's not Matt Canada. He's an actual NFL offensive coordinator.
That too, yes. And the last time that Arthur Smith was an offensive coordinator, the Titans went to the AC Championship game in 2019 and had a 2,000-yard rusher in 2020. So it's, again, not to say that Najee Harris or Jalen Warren or Derrick Henry, but if they can have a great run game with those two, which they already had last year, like that's the one thing that they were fine at was running the ball. I think it's only going to get better. It's only going to set up things for Russ and or Justin Fields. I think even if we don't see Justin Fields as a starter, there's going to be a Justin Fields package, right? We're going to see Fields on the field.
If you look at, you mentioned Arthur Smith being the offensive coordinator in Tennessee, had Tannehill and Marcus Mariota on the roster at that time, used both of them. They would bring in Mariota in certain packages, short distance or goal line situations. They still had, a package of plays for him. It's hard for me to envision that there's not going to be a package of plays for Justin Fields.
I think in the first month of the year, let's say the first 4 games, there's going to be a situation where in the first couple games, it's just, dipping your toe in the water of Justin Fields. Like, oh, here's a nice little RPO. Here's a nice little option play that picks up 6 yards on the ground. I think like week 3 or somewhere in there at home, they'll run something like that, but it's going to be a play action and he's going to hit Pickens in stride for like a 60-yard bomb touchdown. And that's going to be the planting of the seeds of Justin Fields starting quarterback in Pittsburgh. That's my prediction.
There we go. I said my prediction was he's going to have more rushing touchdowns this year than pass completions.
Ooh, that's a fun little caveat. I like that. Yeah. So you think like it's at the 3-yard line, 2nd and goal. Justin, get your ass in there.
Because I mean, Russ thinks he's a better athlete at this point in his career than he is. That's why he took so many sacks over the last couple years. He can still move a little bit around back there, but he thinks he's still like 27, 28 years old back there, being able to extend plays. I just feel like when they're going to go into situations, again, like short yard distance or around the goal line where they're looking for the QB to get out and whether it's putting it in his hands for an option or him just actually running the ball like a designed quarterback run, that's the guy you're going to go to. I just don't see them putting Russ in those positions.
I don't either. And especially in a Arthur Smith offense where they can go now Michael Pruitt with Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington blocking and have just Jalen Warren and Najee. Just run it like Navy. Just do it. From 5 yards and in, we just become the 1967 Navy, whatever that. What are they? The black? That's Army. That's the Black Knights. What's Navy's logo?
Midshipman.
Oh, that's so good. Yes, the Navy midshipman. Yeah, just become that. Just turn it into their Army Navy game from 5 yards and in, and tell defenses good luck. I'm very much. Do you think that they open up with Denver on Monday night? I will be very furious.
I think I think their first 2 games are to be on the road this year.
I hate it. They've got more away games than home games this year. So
they do, and you can normally predictively look at the Pirates schedule just because they share parking, and the Pirates are at home both the first 2 Sundays of the NFL season.
Ah, okay. I don't know if there's betting for NFL schedule.
It could be. I guess it could be a Monday night at home within those first 2 weeks.
That's a good point.
Yeah, but typically, if I were making a prediction, I think the exact opposite of last year where they started out home against 49ers Browns, we're away.
Okay. Yeah, that is one pain in the butt about sharing parking with the Pirates, is that the home opener usually doesn't come until the second to last week in September or the last week in September, depending on how things go down. I can't wait, man. I'm gonna see you at Friday Night SmackDown. That's gonna be fun. Very much looking forward to seeing our Lord and Savior Cody Rhodes. Gonna be a good time. Are you gonna make any trips to camp this year?
I believe so. We actually, Alan and I have kind of been drawing up some plans for Steelers Now with that. So I think I'm actually going to be there this year.
Very sick. Yeah. So I will see you in person here in the next few months, and then in the next 7 days when we're both at SmackDown. That'll be a lot of fun. I've never been to a WWE show. I've been to plenty of AEW ones. This will be my first WWE one.
Really?
Yeah.
Jeez, I was just at WrestleMania a weekend.
How was that, by the way? Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
Dude, it's hard for me to put into words. So like Saturday was fine, but Sunday, I mean, it is so hard for me to put into words that experience and just like what I felt.
Take me through it. So Solo comes in, and then Cena's music hits.
Yeah,
Cena comes in. AA, Rock comes down. Rock bottom to Cena. They do the mirroring of their WrestleMania match from a decade ago. Mm-hmm. What went through the mind of Zach Smith when you heard gong?
So I was hopeful that was the Stone Cold spot.
Yeah,
that's what I
think everybody was. Yeah,
that's what I had been thinking leading up. But honestly, the Undertaker, one of his 2 losses at WrestleMania was Roman, so there's at least some storyline there, obviously. Yeah, so I had seen the Undertaker up in a suite earlier. I didn't notice, and nobody really did, that he had left that to come down for that spot. So the fact that he was in a suite made me think that he wasn't going to be involved. I just thought he was there to watch the show. But I think myself and everybody there was just frozen from the point where Cena's music hit. Everybody stood up and nobody sat back down from that point on, from the rest of the show. So I don't know. It was just like nostalgia, man. It was like my childhood all wrapped into 5 minutes of a wrestling match. And it was what wrestling's all about. It's why people that are our age are still wrestling fans.
Yes.
And just, I mean, what a moment. And I'm so happy to have been there for that. Like, to go to a WrestleMania is one thing, but like specifically that WrestleMania, man, that's obviously, I'll never forget it.
That will, like, as soon as that happened, like in my head, I was like, this is going to be something that's talked about for literally forever in wrestling. That was the most perfect thing ever. And the perfect, after last year, I was very much like vocal about, I hate WWE. Why are we doing this? Another year-long thing with Roman. This company sucks. Look, hindsight being 2020, it made Cody winning in that match so much sweeter that I'm happy it happened.
It makes you wonder what the story could have been if they did pull the trigger on Cody last year, what route that they would have won. And it still could have been great, obviously, but everything that we got because of Roman winning last year, obviously the Civil War bloodline at Money in the Bank was great, with Jay pinning Roman and then them breaking off, main event Jey Uso becoming a thing, and then for whatever reason, Jimmy turning on him after he was the one that kicked Roman to take them out of the bloodline.
It did get a little bit muddy there. But
yeah, there was definitely a point in time where I was like fully out on the bloodline. Like the most I've been in was obviously the Sammy Uso stuff. That was fantastic.
Sure. Yeah.
Probably the best that they've done. They pulled me back in once, main event Jey Uso kind of rose up and stuff like that. Jimmy turning kind of pushed me back out. And then I got back in probably once Cody won the Rumble. And then I was like, what in the world is happening here? He's just handing the keys over to The Rock.
Yeah.
Obviously, the crowd forcing the company's hand to go back in. And
that's right. We did it, Zach Smith. We did it. We got our guy.
We got our guy. And them basically changing course and the way that it all turned out. I mean, cap tip to them because they executed it beautifully.
Pro wrestling is a love story, and when it's at its best, there's no better form of entertainment in the world than professional wrestling. Zach Smith, what do you got coming on your respective podcasts and work? Plug all of everything that you're doing, just everything.
So on Around the 412, I put this out yesterday. I just said we got a big few weeks coming on Around the 412. We just had Pat Frymuth on a couple weeks ago. Yep. There will be 2 more members of the Pittsburgh Steelers joining our show within the next couple weeks. I don't want to give away because I haven't even put it out yet myself, but I will tease that. And then ESPN's own Dan Orlovsky is joining us for draft week. So he will be on the show to talk about, obviously, pick number 20 in the entire Steelers draft. I'm most curious to get his thoughts on the center class, just because obviously you've seen the conversation too, where Mel Kiper doesn't have a center going. He has Jackson Powers Johnson at 47, Zach Frazier at 57. And there are people that want Jackson Powers Johnson at 20. So I'm just like, I want his thoughts on the disconnect there between the NFL and everybody outside of the NFL with this center class. So very excited about that. So yeah, follow us everywhere at Around the 412, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast from. You can find us there. And then my man Alan Saunders and I on Steelers Afternoon Drive, you can find us everywhere as well, part of SteelersNow.com.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that. In terms of this channel, again, we'll keep having your favorite Pittsburgh and Steelers commenters, Twitter faces, all that fun stuff. I'll keep making appearances on here. I already said it, so I'm going to say it again. Probably shouldn't have leaked it yet. But Patrick Queen, that is very much in the works. We're still putting together the fine details of when. So probably should have kept that under lock and key until it was like a date and time. But oh well, it'll come
it's
out
hard, man. When you got something like that, it's hard not to jump the gun. I've done it.
It's okay. And you know what? If it turns out that I did jump the gun and something happens, then oh well, I'll eat it. But for now, I'll
just come back on the show wearing a Patrick Queen jersey.
That's a good idea. Did you order one?
Not yet, but I mean, I'm going to.
Probably. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. So that'll be coming. And then in terms of written work, my feature on Kalen Carson from Wake Forest, cornerback at Wake Forest. That's on USA Today. The continued Steelers coverage up behind the steel curtain. I'll be doing, well, I did sit down with Jamari Thrash from Louisville, so the feature on him will be coming out in the next, before the draft, we'll say, before the draft, probably in the next week. But do all that YouTube stuff, like, subscribe. I know I hate it when people say it, but, you know, it does help. So just got to 500, trying to get to 1,000 before the end of the year. So like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. Zach, buddy, this is a lot of fun. We'll definitely do more stuff, you know, ahead of the season, during the season. You are more than welcome to talk football with me anytime. And I very much enjoyed this. So take care. Until then, I'll see you Friday at SmackDown.
Appreciate you, man. Anytime.
All right, y'all. Take care. See you soon on the channel. Like, subscribe. Thank you so much for tuning in.